Every year around the Christmas holiday, magical things always seem to happen. Some things are marvelous and joyful, like visits from Santa or a snowman coming alive. Many people say they can feel the Christmas magic in the air or around them. Some things, however, aren't so joyful. Around Christmas every year, kidnappings, murder, and suicide rates go up drastically as well. Even when hard things like this happen, people often feel, yet rarely do they admit, that they still feel a kind of holiday magic behind it, although be it a dark magic. One example comes from a Christmas demon known as the Krampus. The Krampus is well known in countries like Germany and Switzerland for taking naughty children in the dead of Christmas Eve night. Here is one such account. December 6th, 2013. My name is Ellie Rockford. I am currently 7 years old as I write this. I confide in this journal something I can't tell my family because they would never believe me. I am often told that I am very smart for my age, because I say and do things that most kids my age don't. But if I tell a strange story, no matter how hard I try to get them to believe me, my parents and siblings say it's just my imagination. Today, I looked out my window into the street by our house and saw a man who looked like a shadow with horns. The eyes glowed orange, and seeing him scared me a lot. He was ringing a bunch of bells or something, but I just tried to ignore him and sleep. Then I heard a knock at the door. I went down to see who it was for Mommy and Daddy, but when I got to the door, someone stuck a card through our mail slot and ran off really quickly. The card had a picture of a monster who had bull legs, a tail, and horns on a really scary-looking goat head that looked half-human. I was so scared that it was the thing on the street, but I don't know what to do. I think I know what it is, but I hope I'm wrong. I showed the card to my dad. He said it was Krampus. The bottom of the card said, Gross von Krampus. Daddy says every year Krampus punishes bad boys and girls on Christmas, but Santa gives good boys and girls toys. So now I'm not so scared. I always get toys on Christmas, so I must be a good kid. I still didn't tell him about the thing on the street. December 24th, 2013. My parents will be gone for most of the night tonight, and Christmas morning tomorrow for some stupid work thing they both have. We usually have Christmas at 6, but we have to wait for Mommy and Daddy to get home first. Mom told Brad, my oldest brother, that we would have a babysitter because she didn't trust him to watch all 5 of us by himself. Mom often let Brad watch us, but we had broken a lot of things the last couple times we were left alone, so Mommy said she would get Rebecca to watch us. Rebecca came to the house at 5. She was very pretty and Brad couldn't stop staring at her. Mommy and Daddy left a few minutes after Rebecca got here. This was the first time Rebecca watched 6 kids at the same time before, and I don't think she knew what she was getting herself into. My youngest sister Molly, who's 3, threw a tantrum after her parents left. Levi and Garrett, my younger twin brothers, who were both 5, started fighting. Brad talked with Rebecca most of the night, and Rachel spent most of the night in her room. Mom and Dad said we could still get Christmas gifts tomorrow, but we needed to wait to open them until they got home. We made hot cocoa, but the cocoa maker was broken, so the hot chocolate burned our mouths, and we all got candy canes too. Rebecca started to put us to bed around 8, and finally succeeded at 9:30. Even though she was clearly exhausted and frustrated with us, she told us she had fun and that she wouldn't have spent her Christmas Eve any other way. I awoke in the middle of the night, at about 11, to see a crimson moon casting a dim, red glow on the winter snow. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a red object coming towards our house. Fast. It was hard to make out, but it looked like a red sleigh being pulled by reindeer. I instantly recognized it as Santa's sleigh and ran to hide on the stairs and waited for him to come down the chimney anxiously. Out of the window, to the right of our fireplace, I saw the sleigh fly overhead and heard many hooves trotting on the roof. I made sure to maintain perfectly still and silent as a mouse. I waited for what felt like an eternity while soft footsteps echoed on the roof above me, getting closer to the chimney. I heard scuffling as ash and dust started falling from the fireplace. Soon, 2 black boots landed, and then the rest of jolly old Saint Nick came through the fireplace with a bag of toys on his back. Without speaking a word, he went straight to our tree. He took gifts from his bag and scattered them under our lit-up plastic evertree, then started on the milk and cookies we left for him. I felt that I had held my breath the entire time while hiding on the stairs. I couldn't believe I was spying on the real Santa Claus in my own home. Eventually, he made his way over to our stockings and started putting various knickknacks and candies in our stockings, starting with Molly. When he got to Levi, he took out a small, black rock and eyed it sadly before placing it in Levi's stocking. It took me a second to realize that he gave Levi coal. I tried to stifle a laugh to the best of my abilities, but a small squeak escaped my lips anyways. Santa turned around and scanned the room. I remained as still as ever. He turned back to the stockings, this time keeping his back to me, and put a piece of coal in Garrett's stocking too. He put a candy cane in Brad's stocking, along with a pocket knife. Rachel got a new phone and some Kit Kats. Finally, he moved to my stocking, which was always the furthest to the right, even though I'm the middle child. He began rummaging through his sack as I leaned forward excitedly to see what presents I was getting. Santa pulled out a large, jet black piece of coal and stuffed it into my stocking. I felt a wave of anger and sadness and regret all at once. I almost stood up right then and there to tell off that jolly old elf. But when he turned around, I saw tears in his eyes. He looked as if he was filled with similar emotions as I was, like he didn't like to have to give bad kids coal. It was for this reason that I remained quiet as Santa climbed back up my chimney, got into his sleigh, and flew away. I watched out my downstairs window as the sleigh flew from the roof and into the black abyss of Christmas night. I sat there, still in place for a very long time, pondering how could I be a better child next year, when I spotted something outside of the window again. It looked like the same figure I'd seen before, but this time, the sleigh looked as if it was black. I wrote this off as it was really dark outside, except the moon's red glow. I wondered why Santa would come back. Maybe he forgot something. Maybe he made a mistake. Maybe I wasn't naughty and he was on his way back to fix his mistake. My mind was racing from one thought to another as I began to hype myself up about all my possible Christmas presents. I stopped watching the window and began to daydream about the next morning, until the hooves on the roof interrupted my thoughts. I heard a loud, heavy clacking, this time as he got closer to the chimney. Ash began to fall down the chimney, creating an ashy cloud around the fireplace, as what I assumed to be Santa began coming down and landed with a loud crash. My final thought before seeing what came next was, how has no one noticed this? Through the cloud of thick black ash produced 2 large horns, with stripes of red and white like those candy canes. As the dust settled, the rest of the figure was revealed. His skin was pale, icy-looking blue. His beard was like Santa's, only it was black and came to a point. His nose was long and his face was grizzled, but more human than I thought. His horns like they'd touch the ceiling if he jumped. His body looked human in shape, but animal in appearance. His legs were twisted and ended in hooves that looked like a cow or a bull. He had a long tail. His torso was contorted, and everything but his face and palms was covered in fur. He had broken chains around his wrists and what looked like a very heavy red Christmas ornament attached by his tail and by another chain. His ears were pointed, and so were his yellow teeth. Despite his horrid, outlandish appearance, the most noticeable things about the creature were its bells that it wore, and its basket on its back that held a limp arm of a child hanging from it. The stories were true, and so was Krampus. I couldn't believe my eyes. I had seen sleighs go by, magic reindeer fly overhead, and even Santa Claus himself. But none of that could have prepared me for the beast that is Krampus. He moved around the room with such speed that I was caught off guard. The thing looked about 8 feet tall without its horns, and with them, he towered over everything in our large home. He made his way to the fireplace and took the coal from Levi's stocking. He rolled it around in his long, bony fingers for a moment. Then, he took the coal from Garrett's stocking, then finally mine. He studied the coal for a moment. A wide smile filled with pointy yellow teeth beamed across his face. "Naughty little children," I heard it say in a cold, raspy voice. A shiver ran up my spine as he spoke. I was paralyzed in both fear and awe at the creature that roamed my living room beneath me. I thought he was moving towards the tree, but he walked past it and started going down the hallway into Levi and Garrett's room. I remember the things my father used to say about it, that he whips bad kids and takes them away. Sometimes he even eats them. Sometimes he shakes them and scares them into being good. All these hard thoughts and more danced through my head as the monster creeped into the twins' room. I tried to scream with all my might, but no sound would escape my mouth. As I was finally able to choke out, "Levi! Garrett!" Screams already filled their room. Levi came running out of his room, screaming his head off as Garrett followed suit. The creature's long, twisted arm reached out from the room and grabbed Garrett's leg, pulling him back into the room. I stood up from my spot on the stairs and motioned Levi to come to me. Garrett's screams fell silent. The Krampus emerged from the room alone. His nose seemed shorter now, his face even more deformed now. I grabbed Levi's hand tightly as we ran for Brad's room. I wailed on his door again and again, but he wouldn't come out. I would have to try harder to get his attention, but I could hear it coming from the stairs, with each hoof hitting each step. I took Levi into the laundry room and told him to hide in the laundry chute. Once he was inside, I began lowering the laundry hamper so he could get downstairs without confronting the monster. Before he was lowered out of sight, I told Levi to go start the hot cocoa maker because I had a plan. He nodded, and once he got to the bottom, I felt the hamper get lighter as he climbed out. I heard the hooved footsteps get louder and closer to the laundry room. I began pulling up the laundry hamper and climbed in just as the door violently flung open, despite the locks on it. The beast licked his lips with his long tongue as he slowly approached my trembling body inside the hamper. I began to bounce myself and rock the hamper as the Krampus got closer and closer. The hamper wouldn't fall no matter how hard I rocked it, and the creature was nearly upon me. I felt its breath on me as it excitedly panted, getting further. I expected its breath to be hot like that of a dog's, but instead it felt like the coldest winter chill caressing my skin. I shook the whole hamper as savagely as I could before it finally budged. The hamper fell, and before I knew it, I was on the first floor. I crawled out of the chute and ran into the kitchen as the demon rampaged upstairs. As I came to the kitchen, I noticed no signs of my little brother, but I did see the hot cocoa maker was on. The stomping of the creature upstairs continued, but didn't seem to be near the stairs, so I focused on finding Levi. He wasn't hiding in any of the cabinets, and he wasn't anywhere in the living room. I decided that he might be in his room, so I quietly crept to it slowly but steadily. The twins' room was trashed entirely, and Levi wasn't there. There was blood on the wall. I shuddered to think that it once belonged to my baby brother. A small bloody handprint was smeared on the wall by the door. Dread was all I felt in that moment. Dread for misbehaving all year. Dread for what had become of my little brother. And dread for the silence that fell in place of hoof stomping around upstairs. I quickly and silently made my way back to the kitchen and took out a large coffee pitcher of scalding hot cocoa. As I snuck out of the kitchen into the living room, I had an ominous feeling of dread, as if I was being watched. I could barely see in the dark of the night, and I couldn't locate our light switches. The only source of light I had was the dim, eerie glow of the lights of the Christmas tree. As I scanned all entrances to the dining room, something moved and caught my eye. The chandelier began to start swinging, as if someone bumped it or hit it. There was a soft thudding that accompanied the squeaking of the rocking corona, As I looked around to make out another vague shape in the glow of the Christmas lights, I saw it was bumping the chandelier. The monster was crawling on my ceiling like a large twisted spider. His arms were bent in excruciating-looking ways to grip the ceiling and watched me with his eyes that burned like fire. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, at the very sight of it, but instead I held my ground. A cruel smile spread across the face of the predator who was stalking me. He undug his fingers from the ceiling and landed on the floor in front of me with a thunderous crash, mere inches away from me. This was his mistake. I threw an entire pitcher of burning hot cocoa on his face, and the beast immediately started writhing in agony. He covered his hands over his quickly blistering face. He took his hands off his face just as it began to melt and peel off, the bits of flesh and blood melting away to reveal his horrible skull, with his eyes still in their sockets. It froze for a while, and in a brief moment, I was happy, assured and content that the Krampus was dead. But then it only started cackling an awful and disturbingly malevolent laugh. It pierced my eyes like knives and loomed over me to instill as much fear as it could. It was working. Before my very eyes, the muscles around the creature's skull started to grow back, and in seconds, its new face had formed. It looked more like a goat with pointy teeth than a human, but you could still partially see it in there. Its beard was still as long as before, but now it looked almost out of place on the demonic beast's head. I turned and ran behind the Christmas tree, avoiding the abomination's lanky arms as I ran by. The Krampus immediately started coming towards the tree, intent on harming me. I pushed the large plastic evergreen on the monster and ran back upstairs to find my little brother. I wailed on my siblings' door, but no one would wake up no matter how hard I pounded on their doors. Everyone locks the doors to their rooms when they go to sleep, so we're not bothered. But the doors were also heavy, and not much sound got through them. I began to shout for Levi as loud as I could, hoping he'd respond. Then Levi appeared at the top of the stairs. We stared at each other. He looked terrified and sad. I started to walk towards him when suddenly my baby brother was impaled by the Krampus's horns. His body was thrusted up and thrashed around by the savage creature as he convulsed and shook spastically on its horns. I've seen people die on TV before, but watching it in real life is entirely different. No one should have to go through it. My brother didn't deserve that. No one deserves that. Santa and Christmas are about love and cheer. Krampus made Christmas about hatred and retribution. I watched helplessly while the thing ripped my brother's shaking body from its horns and dropped his lifeless body into the basket on his back. The demon began to strut towards me with malicious intentions, so I ducked into my mom and dad's empty room and opened the top right drawer of my dad's dresser. I wasn't tall enough to see what I was reaching for, but when I felt it, I pulled out my dad's pistol. I opened the other dresser, and it put 2 bullets in the pistol by the time the creature burst open the door. I shot it twice and hit it both times, but it was unfazed by the bullets. The loud noise clearly hurt both our ears, and as the monster clawed its ears while screaming in pain, I began to quickly crawl towards the window until something long, thin, and tight grasped my right leg and began pulling me back. I looked behind me in terror to see the Krampus was using its incredibly long tongue to pull me to its mouth, filled with sharp, jagged teeth. I began to breathe, in and out, quicker and quicker, and began panicking as my foot got closer to its mouth. I lifted my left leg and kicked it in the face twice before its tongue finally loosened. Before I could breathe, Krampus picked me up and began shaking me wildly. I kicked him a second time, this time with my right foot, and he flung me into the hallway where I began to limp away. Hey guys, it's Evan again. Thank you again for listening. Today was part 1 of a 2-part creepypasta I'm doing for Christmas. Part 2 will be released next Sunday, and we're going to try this format again if people seem to respond well to it. So if you like it, let us know, and we can do more 2-part videos in the future. So thanks again for listening.